Alan, thanks ever so much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
What I just wanted to do really was highlight a little bit more about obviously the roundtable event and the State of Flux Supply Management Survey, which is currently being out in the market, ready for people to start responding and continue responding. My first question for you actually is why did you set up State of Flux? What was it that you saw as an opportunity?
Yeah, thanks, David. And again, appreciate all your help on the roundtable event. I thought it was, well, both events were great. I'm looking forward to the next few.
Yeah, thank you.
So I was at Accenture. I was lucky enough to be running the European Centre of Excellence for Procurement and Supply Chain. And one of the projects I worked on was quite a large sourcing project for British Airways, where I'd written the strategic sourcing process.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see a lot of ex-BA people rocking backwards and forwards about the 7-step process that I wrote. And Accenture really kind of now uses that as their process, which is quite cool. But I noticed at that time in the Centre of Excellence that people were able to implement the first 5 steps of the 7 steps, but then it became almost tumbleweed in steps 6 and 7. And I know from my time as a CPO also, you know, really it was, we did the deal and it kind of got thrown over to the business to manage the ongoing relationship. And yes, we'd dip in and out on performance metrics and things like that, but we wouldn't really shape it and roll it, get involved in it and have a role in it. So I really looked at that and went, well, hold on, there's a huge amount of value being lost in that. So that's really why I focused on State of Flux. So we've really tried to focus. We do a bit of sourcing work, but predominantly what we do is everything post-deal. So things like contract management, performance management, risk management, innovation management, and of course, relationship management. And I'll throw in those things like sustainability. We've really focused on all of those things to say, how do you get the most out of it? And it's been a fairly long journey. 16 years ago, it was a bit like trying to push water up a hill. And that's why we started doing the annual surveys, actually, was to provide people with data, because we often got the, well, I can see, you know, a 5% save if I do some strat sourcing. I know there's saving in supplier management, but I'm struggling to count it and I'm struggling to create a business case. Yeah. So we started doing the research, and that was 12 years ago. We started doing that.
And that, I mean, that for me, that's really interesting actually, because you've got 12 years of data then, haven't you? You've got 12 years of proper bona fide data, not pie in the sky data. What's that sort of shown you over that last 10 to 12 years then? Even from my side, you know, hiring into that space for that period, I've seen in vogue, out of vogue, in vogue, out of vogue. So what have you sort of seen over that period then?
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, yes, we have a hell of a lot of data. It's well over 2 million data points now on supply management, which is good, you know, so we can now put some black and white data around what to do, what not to do, and what and when goes wrong kind of thing. And there are some absolute kind of key things that come out of that data. So for example, we know that if a supply management program must be run as a business program, not a procurement program. So it's a business change program, not a procurement change program, because otherwise it doesn't stick. It just becomes a procurement initiative. And coupled with that, we also know that to be good at SRM, you need as close to possible CEO sponsorship as you can. So, you know, either CEO or direct report of the CEO needs to be the sponsor. We also know that it really shouldn't be a procurement sponsor. It should be someone outside of procurement.
Yeah.
So there is some direct correlation we've seen. Do a voice of the supplier, train your people. So some of it you'd know intuitively, but others we can put hard and fast data around that, and it really does shape kind of the programs that you put in place. So it's been fun, but clearly a lot of data to manage, trawl through, interpret. But I think it's been really valuable. I think the key piece of data, and this hasn't changed much, is that if you're good at SRM, there's between 3 and 6+% additional over and above the contract, and that's been consistent from day one.
Okay.
So it's pretty compelling for that.
Absolutely. With the sort of peaking and troughing of SRM in its own right, as standalone roles back, 2008 to 2010, everybody was hiring SRM category managers or SRM leads. Did that change the content of your survey too much, do you think? Just out of interest, because it would have been more prevalent and more at the front of people's minds, wouldn't it?
What we tended to see was the flavour of the focus changed slightly. So most supply management programs are built on 3 things: value, risk, or innovation. And depending on the industry, you put more emphasis on, so financial services, generally it's all about risk. Value a little bit, but predominantly risk.
Yeah.
So interestingly, if you look at 2008, came right after the credit crisis, and people realised how critical suppliers were, grew their supplier management. I think we then got a bit complacent, and so the supply management programs sort of dwindled a bit. And guess what? We're now in the middle of another crisis, and supply management is pretty key. So
there you go.
Yeah, funny that there is a correlation. But as we were speaking just before this, what we're now seeing is kind of a 2-pronged approach where you've got to save money, but you also have to preserve relationships. So we're almost seeing a splitting of the procurement function into business continuity, save money, and protect our relationships and make sure they're going forward. So I'm expecting some interesting results this year as well.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the next question I was going to say is, what impact has COVID had? And that seems to be the message that you're giving me, isn't it? That it's almost like a fine balance between cost and relationship, management, as it were.
Yeah, what we're seeing. So look, the other stat that we saw over the 12 years is only because we break the results into leaders, what we call fast followers, and followers, and we sort of make a kind of slight joke about those in the followers group are just learning how to spell supply management, whereas the leaders now. To put that in context, only 9% of companies are in the leadership group. So what we're seeing in COVID is, or as a result of COVID, is a lot of people now realizing that actually they need to sort out the supply management. And the sugarcoating or the kind of, our supply management is great because we're a big brand and of course the supplier wants to work with us. Well, that's rubbish. The big brands are often the worst at treating suppliers well and looking after their suppliers. So we're now seeing kind of what we're calling supply management at speed, where people are going, right, I need to get it in and I need to get it in now. So we're definitely changing on the consulting side of the business and the technology side of the business. We're changing our approach to make sure that all of this can be done at speed. Where the sticking point was in the past was behavior change. and getting the kind of right behaviours in the, not just in procurement, but across the organisation. And COVID is doing a great job of just aligning everyone to that single focus of behaviour change. So that used to be a huge hurdle for procurement and us. I think that's almost being blown out of the water because of COVID.
Do you think it's also given mandate's not quite the right word, but has it given more license for procurement to operate across the wider business then, or the supply relationship piece to include, sales, finance, physical supply chain, manufacturing, and all the way across, where perhaps before it may have been told just to, wind its neck in a little bit?
Well, it's interesting, I mean, I recall in the kind of height of COVID-19, maybe 6 weeks ago, where all the press was, there was nothing else in the press. And I remember watching a news segment and kind of supplier management or supply chain was mentioned something like 13 times in a 3-minute segment on the news. And my joking comment was, now my mother-in-law actually understands what we do. But in reality, we are now on the board agenda. For years, everyone's gone, why isn't procurement on a board agenda? Well, guess what? We are now. We've got to make the most of it. I know the virus part of the crisis is horrific, but actually the rest of it is a supply chain, supply management problem. Yeah, we're on the board agenda. We've got to make the most of it. So we're definitely seeing that as a huge change driver. But in my opinion, it's now time for procurement to step up.
Yes.
And take this, because if we don't, someone else, another function will take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings me on to my last sort of question, which is what do you think the future is then for this as a not only as a technical competence, but as an opportunity within organisations? Where's the sort of future for this?
Well, I think, I've been a cynic of, and I'll go back to my 7-step process from, must be nearly 20 years ago. No, not quite. But the only optional step in the process was RFP. And funnily enough, I think one of the key changes that we need to see in the function is, why are we doing RFPs? They've been around for about 40 years. In my opinion, they slow things down. They actually add cost to the entire market, because they have to, everyone who responds to it needs to invest in these RFPs.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, I mean, we've just had one where we spent a year on the RFP. We won the RFP, and a new executive came in and decided to go with someone else. And you're going, where's the governance model on this? How does this work? And someone else without the experience. So you're kind of going, that just makes us completely, our credit worthiness just completely, we're not credible anymore. So I think procurement must change. I think there's value in the kind of cost out, expediting, helping the business survive piece. And I think there's an understanding the business needs. And I think there's value in driving standardized, consistent, very effective supply management. And to me, that's where, as an industry, we need to focus on those 2 areas and get ourselves away from this kind of mechanical RFP piece that hasn't helped us, that's positioned us as admin people.
Absolutely.
Really.
And I was having this conversation with someone earlier this week, and I was saying the term procurement almost diminishes the scope of the commercial impact that the role has. And the moment you say that, people have an opinion what procurement is. And so you're already on the back foot, particularly when you're talking about management and supply management and innovating risk mitigation and all of that, aren't you?
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, in the past, the exec team haven't wanted procurement involved in sensitive relationships. You know, we're seen as the guys that blow up relationships, not the guys that kind of enable them. How many procurement departments are involved in the banking relationship of their company?
Yeah,
You know, between them and treasury. You know, and those are critical relationships for most organizations. Yeah, we don't even get invited to speak in those, you know, or attend. Or 9 times out of 10, we don't even know they're on.
Yes, yeah.
So
it's interesting. Well, thank you thank you for taking the time out to do this interview. I really appreciate it, and it's been it's been really enjoyable having you and your team on the round tables. It's been really insightful. We are obviously still pushing for the survey to be completed, right? So people have got probably another couple of weeks.
Please complete the survey. Yeah.
It's all well and good having a look at it, but you've got to spend the time to do it, haven't you? Huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, it only takes about 20-25 minutes.
Yeah.
And what we find is just the act of going through the question sets will make people think more around how they're structuring their supply management.
Yeah.
But the other good thing is anyone who completes it, we give them a free benchmark against their peer organizations and the overall results. And we break it down into what we call the 6 pillars of SRM. So they can look at how they're approaching process or technology or people, and see where there are areas of improvement. So it's a very quick, easy way for people to do a quick benchmark of their supply management.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Well, look, thank you very much for taking the time to have this segment. I really appreciate it. Right, have a good day, and we'll see how we get on with how many respondents you get. And I'm, personally, I'm really looking forward to the next roundtable event, which is focused on sustainability, which your input is going to be invaluable in that as well. And then as we head towards probably October, November time for the launch of the survey.
Yeah, so typically, so the survey closes early July, so get in now. We then kind of generally spend the summer crunching the data and writing the book. And in saying that, we're already writing the book. And so normally the book comes out sort of mid to late October. And we, in the past, have run what we call SRM summits in London, Chicago, and either Sydney or Melbourne. Last year was Melbourne. And we're just looking at those, whether we do those virtually in the COVID-19 world. And I think that's how we will run them this year.
Yeah.
So there'll be virtual summits. So again, anyone who does the survey will get an invite to the summit. And those are typically pretty popular events.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really good. Thanks ever so much for that. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and thanks again for all your help.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.